Geraldine Herbert, and I have questions this morning.
Yeah, so the first one that comes in is, I have a diesel car and I'm going to be crucified by new taxes and charges as they try to phase it out. What are your thoughts on the diesel cars?
It's a difficult one to look into the future at this stage. I would say short term, there was a tax strategy report that came out, which usually kind of indicates what the government are thinking about doing in the next budget. Now, it looks like they're more likely to reward drivers who buy environmentally friendly cars rather than punish those who are driving diesel or petrol cars. That said, that's just for the short term. I would imagine that it's going to become more costly to drive a diesel or a petrol car. So maybe when it comes to your next option, you might think about something different. Obviously, it comes down to budget, it comes down to your driving requirements, your mileage, all of that. But really, I would be looking at something a little more environmentally friendly if you can the next time round.
Okay, so the next one is, when do I know if my tyres need to be replaced?
Okay, there's two things you can check with your tyres. The first is you need to look at the tread. The tread needs to be about 1.6 millimetres at a bare minimum. That if it goes anything lower than that, it's actually illegal and you're liable to get a fine and penalty points and all sorts. Ideally, you need it to be about 3 millimetres. If you buy a brand new tyre, it's 8, so that'll give you an idea. Now, the best way to test that is to get a €1 coin and put it into the centre of the tyre. If you can see any of the gold rim at the bottom of the coin, then you're nearing the 1.6 and you need to think about getting a replaced, have it looked at by in a tyre centre. The other thing you need to look at is the actual age of your tyre. Now, there's a 4-digit number at the sidewall. The first 2 digits, say it's 2214, the first 2 digits, 22 means the 22nd week and the 14 means 2014. So therefore that tyre is 5 years old. If your tyre is 6 years old or over, the next time you go to the NCT, you'll get what's known as a pass advisory. So if everything else is okay and you pass it, they will still point out that this is an old tyre. So you would need it looked at. So any tyres that are over 6 years, even if they look perfect, you're better off having them checked.
Okay, so the next one, how can I get more efficient use out of my petrol in my car? I drive 300 miles a week for my job and it feels like I'm filling up the tank every couple of days.
Filling up the tank every couple of days, right? That's not good. The first thing I would say is have the car serviced if you haven't already. It could be something small like that. The second thing is have a look again at the tyre pressure. If the tyre pressure is low, it can affect your fuel efficiency. It doesn't affect it a huge amount, but it, everything adds up. The other thing to do is make sure that you take weight out of the car. So if you're carrying golf clubs or double buggies or something like that, that you don't need all the time, take them out, because the more weight you have in the car, the more you're going to use fuel. And the other thing is just try and moderate your driving style. If you try not to brake harshly or accelerate harshly, you'll actually find the average is about, you can change your fuel efficiency by about 15% if you kind of smooth out your driving style. So that's a thought.
Okay, so the next one, I want to buy a new car, but what is better for me? Is it better to take out a loan from the credit union or go on finance with the car?
You want to buy a new car? It really depends. The two options I suppose you have are a credit union loan or a bank loan or whatever. Now, the advantage of that is if you run into difficulty while you're paying back that loan, you lose your job or your circumstances change or whatever, you can then sell the car because you actually own the car. You've bought it outright. You owe the money to the credit union, not on the car. The advantages of buying on a PCP are it's much lower, the repayments you're going to make. But the problem is you don't actually own the car. If you run into difficulty, PCPs can be very difficult to get out of. You're tied into a contract. If your circumstances change and it turns out you're going to do much greater mileage than maybe you did when you first took out the PCP contract, you're going to have difficulty as well because they have very tight regulations around mileage. So I would say if you want the use of a car for 3 years and you're not particularly interested in owning one, you just literally want to use it and then you're quite happy to roll on to another PCP and give it back, then PCP is a good idea. Also, if you have a regular steady job and you're going to have no change of circumstances in the next 3 years. However, if you want to own your car outright, you want the security of it and you don't necessarily want to give it back after 3 years, you'd like to have it for much longer, I would look at borrowing the money.
Okay, so this brings me on then to the few questions around PCP. So what are the restrictions / penalties around PCP? Is there a limit to how many kilometres you can drive in a year or damages services the cars?
Yeah, they're very strict about mileage. It's usually limited to anywhere between 15 to 18,000 kilometres. So if you exceed that, then PCP is not for you. The idea is the dealer wants to preserve the value in that car. And if you exceed that mileage, the value is going to be depreciated and they don't want that. The other thing they're very strict about is you have to have it serviced. You have to look after it. You have to have it properly maintained. So you can't do anything to it. you're not leasing it as such, but it's not your car. It's still owned by the finance company or the dealership or whatever. So you have to bear that in mind. You're literally getting the use of it. Now, having said that, there are great advantages to PCP. You're getting a new car. You're getting it at a reduced rate. You've all the cheap motor tax, the fuel efficiency of a new car. But you need to be aware there are strict regulations and rules surrounding them.
Okay, so what is the process when the contracted years are up on the PCP? So can you buy it outright, or is there an upgrade?
Okay, when you first take out a PCP contract, say you're looking at a car that's worth 20,000, the dealer might say to you that car is worth 10,000, will be worth 10,000 at the end of the 3-year contract. Now, when you come back at the end of the 3 years, you have 3 options. If you've decided that I've absolutely fallen madly in love with the car and I don't want to give it back, you'll have to pay that 10,000. That's what's owed on the car. Now, if you've maintained the car, you've stayed within the mileage, you've met all the restrictions and everything, but you've decided you don't want another PCP, you can just simply hand back the keys and walk away from the contract. Now, the third thing that could happen is, again, if you've maintained the car well, the car market is doing well, and it turns out that car that the dealer said was worth 10,000 is now worth 11,500. You can take that 1,500, that extra equity in the car, and use it as a deposit towards your next PCP. But that's not guaranteed. That's just, the market is going well. You've looked after the car. What is guaranteed is what the car is worth, that 10,000 at the end. But as I said, it might be worth 12,000, it might be worth 11,000. If there is excess, you can use that towards the deposit on your next PCP and roll over to another one. So there are your 3 options. You can walk away, you can buy it, or you can roll on to another PCP.
Okay, and what is the exact process with the PCP? Is it a deposit or a fixed monthly repayment?
Okay, you have to put down a deposit somewhere between 10 and 30%. My advice would be don't go over 20%, for the simple reason that it's a very big stake in a car that you're not going to own at the end of the 3 years. So if you can keep it to 10, 20 on the most, that's fine. Now, you can also use a car, if you have a trade-in, you can use it as a trade-in for the deposit. Then what you have is you have the monthly repayments. So if I go back to the example I gave you, the car is worth 20,000. The dealer might say to you that the car will be worth 10,000 in 3 years' time. You then say put down a deposit of 10%. So you've paid down 2,000, that's forgotten about. The 10,000 at the end of the 3 years is forgotten about. What you're paying back over the next 3 years is the 8,000. It's the bit in between, which, if you can think about it, is essentially the depreciation on the car. It's the amount the car is going to lose. So you're paying that back plus the interest rate, and that's what your monthly repayments are. So when you're looking at a PCP, you're always better to go for a car that depreciates less, because it's actually going to be better value on a PCP than a car that depreciates quite rapidly. So always keep that in mind.
Okay, so this comes in from Marie. So I do a lot of driving in the city traffic. How do I conserve fuel and efficiency?
Again, if you've a newer car, there should be a start on the car. That's about the best way. If you have a much older car and you're going to be stopped for more than, they say, about a minute and a half, you're better off switching off the engine. But that bumper to bumper driving is not good for fuel. It will actually eat it, unless, as I said, you have a mechanism in the car that's actually designed to reduce the cost.
Okay, so the last question is from James. So why is it that even after VRT is paid on a UK import, the car is still up 30% cheaper than buying from dealers in Ireland for cars 1 to 2 years old?
It depends. It's just a bigger market in the UK more than anything else. So some cars are cheaper in the UK. Not all of them. Some of them are on a parity. Volkswagen at the moment are more or less the same price in the UK as they are in Ireland. But you will see huge differences in some car makers in the UK with prices. So that's it. It's not for all of them, but definitely for some of them there is a reduction in price. It's just different market. It's a bigger market, and it's economies of scale. Okay, thank you for that. If you haven't answered any more questions, I'll get to them on the Facebook page later.